felt like I've been ripped out of my life, trapped in some coma dream.
Something I might not wake up from, ever. Something I might not wake up from, ever. Something I might not wake up from, ever.
Think about him, Mom. Everything that's happened to him so far. Nothing's killed him yet.
Hey Walking Dead fans, welcome back to the channel. I've been doing several Shane videos, different discussion videos with him included or about him directly, such as the recent What If Shane Lived video with a part 2 on the way, and another fine presentation by TWD Explained. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and tap that bell for notifications, and on with the show. Quarry Camp, Season 1. Alright, it was established just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, near Interstate 85. And before the outbreak, it was a public nature park area. There was a quarry there. There was a little lake that had formed, a lot of animals, trails, and stuff like that. So how did the camp form? As the outbreak was happening, and you know, the day zero, however you want to call it, day one kind of stuff, that the way it kind of happened, I guess, in Fear the Walking Dead play out. Everyone was just learning about what was going on. Safe zones were being established, but the shit was definitely hitting the fan, and refugees headed toward the city of Atlanta for safety and protection by the U.S. military. There was supposed to be a safe zone in the city of Atlanta. But of course, also infected people, people that had been bitten, just all kinds of people just headed to the city and completely overran the shelter, the outpost, and everything, and pretty much overran the city. No more military, no more safe zone. The highway, the interstates that they're traveling on is backed up. So in this traffic jam of cars on the interstate, Lori meets Carol. So when they decided to leave the highway and establish a campsite, it was Ed and Carol and Sophia, along with Shane, Lori, and Carl, and a few others joined them, and over time, even more joined their little campsite. They had went as a group into the city, Merle, Andrea, Glenn, and some others. That's where they found Rick, but they had went back into the city for supplies. But it's the early days, it's the first 60 days. It was around day 59 when Rick woke up, and about 5 days later they reached the CDC, so the whole first season was very short. It was around the 60-day mark when Rick woke up and found the group and got to the CDC and all of that stuff, so it had been a couple months. So it had been a couple months that they'd been hanging out at the quarry. So Shane really helped form this group, I think, and he was the de facto leader. You know, in one of the scenes, they heard Rick on the radio, and he didn't really come through all the way, and Amy was like, man, people still coming to the city. They just don't know what they're about to get into. And Lori said, we should go out to Interstate 85 and put up signs and direct people away from the city and let them know. And, of course, Shane said, hey, we can't afford to do that. We don't have time to do that. And, you know, we could lose people doing stuff like that. We can't afford to do it. So he was the leader. He was making some decisions such as that. And you got to give it to Shane for at least keeping that group together and alive up to that point. So overall, we know that the camp was overrun by walkers, but that was a little bit combined with stuff like the helicopter that flew over that we know started a horde of walkers heading out away from the city. And that's the one that ended up at Herschel's farm eventually. But they were also running out of food, so they were leaving the city, starting to leave the city and in search of food.
You saw that walker. It was here. It was in camp. They're moving out of the cities. They come back. We need every able body we got. We need them here. We need them to protect camp.
So it seems like Shane's been doing pretty good as far as leader up to this point. Then they find Rick, okay? Rick comes in, and like I say, it's inevitable that the camp would have been overrun and stuff like that. But here's the thing. They handcuffed Merle to the roof, left him. Rick decides he's going to go back and get him. Yes, I agree. You don't leave a human being in a trap like that, like an animal. He's just going to dry up and die of thirst, and that's no way to leave anyone. So Rick does decide to go back. Daryl's going with him. He recruits Glenn to go with him. And, of course, T-Dog is going to go with him because T-Dog's the one that dropped the key to the handcuff by mistake. So those 4 guys are going to go back into the city and try to get Merle. But, of course, Shane steps up and says, dude, Merle Dixon? Douchebag? Look, he's not worth it. He's not worth any one of your lives. Leave him and forget about it. Shane throws in that the walkers are leaving the city. They need every able body they can to stay at the camp and protect the people, protect the camp. And that is where Shane's leadership, as far as his insight, came true.
I'm thinking if you'd have stayed here, instead you went off, you took half our manpower with you. I'm thinking maybe our losses wouldn't have been so bad.
Because after they left, the camp did get overrun and Amy died. Several of the other members of the camp died, but the notable character that died is Amy. Amy could have been saved possibly if they had left Merle Dixon to die and stayed there.
Seems to me what you really need most here are more guns.
But what was a driving factor that made them say, sorry, we're going to go get him anyway? And not just being that they wanted to go get Merle and save him, there was a bag of guns. Remember the bag of guns that Rick dropped in front of the tank? Shane was like, it changed Shane's mind. Like, yeah, man, okay, fine. Go get Merle and get those guns. We need those guns. But Lori, she wasn't convinced and didn't want Rick to go.
Shane blames me for not being here. Do you?
So was it a bad decision for him to go and get the guns and to get Merle because it sacrificed to Amy? Could that have worked out any differently? But there's actually one other thing that made Rick go back, and it wasn't just Merle, and it wasn't just the guns. You got to remember Morgan.
Make me understand.
I owe a debt to a man I met and his little boy.
Rick made a promise to Morgan with this radio to every morning to check in, and Morgan and his son is coming to Atlanta to meet Rick. That was their plan. So Rick's like, I got to get that bag of guns, Lori. I got to get the radio out of it because that's the main thing I'm after, because I made this promise to this guy, Morgan. He saved my life and he's headed to the city. I've got to try to reach him, try to let him know the dangers here and not to come to the city and where we are and all that kind of stuff. So I'm mainly going back for the radio. I got to do that. I made a promise to a guy. So while we're on this subject of Quarry Camp,
Texting.
I miss my vibrator.
Me too.
Carol was in a very abusive relationship with Ed. And in that one scene down at the lake, Andrea started provoking Ed. Ed slaps Carol, trying to get her to come on out of there. And Shane just had a fight with Lori. Lori said, stay away from my family. Lori said, stay away from my son. Don't speak to him. Don't look at him. You told me my husband was dead, you SOB. And, you know, she just had a big thing with Shane telling him to just stay the F away from her and her family. So he was all pissed off anyway. He saw Ed doing that stuff and he beats the living crap out of Ed, right? So the question I just want to throw out there in this video to you guys, as far as this one little scene, do you think Shane was in the right kicking Ed's ass? And could it have been handled differently? Should he have kicked his ass even more? You know, that kind of thing. To me, it was a great scene, and I think Ed definitely deserved it. It helped set up Carol's character even more, especially now, since we're at season 10, and the Rambo that she's become compared to the frail lady that she was back at the Quarry Camp. Wow, what a transformation. And that scene with Shane kicking Ed's ass is a big pivotal point, because it keeps Ed in his tent when the Quarry Camp is attacked, and Ed's one of the first to die. And just one quick note, it could be a zombie apocalypse survival tip for you guys out there. I know you watch The Walking Dead and you're like, what would I do in that situation? Or can I use that as a survival technique? But a lot of the stuff they do is pretty stupid. But check this out. When Merle was on the roof, he was able to get a hold of that hacksaw. The handcuffs are made to be hacksaw proof. You have to have bolt cutters. That's why they grabbed the bolt cutters from Dell back at Quarry Camp before they went. Not only did they need to cut the chain off the door to the roof that T-Dog had put on there, but then they needed to cut through the handcuffs as well. But check this out. As a survival tip, the piece of metal that you see, the rod that the handcuffs are hooked to, that is holding the pipe onto the roof, that's pretty much, you can call it all thread. It's just a piece of metal that's threaded from end to end that you can use to bolt something together. Put a nut and a washer on each end, you're good to go. That all thread, man, you can cut through it with a hacksaw. That is some hacksaw cuttable shit right there. So just as a tip, there's some things like a lock, maybe some handcuffs, you need bolt cutters for. But if you had a hacksaw, don't cut off your hand. Don't be a Merle. Don't be a Merle. Don't cut off your hand. Cut the all thread. That will get you out of that situation and off the roof possibly to be able to get some bolt cutters to go ahead and get the handcuffs the rest of the way off of your wrist. Another situation we run into at the Quarry Camp, which Shane is brought it to the attention of, again showing his leader, him being the leader of the camp, is Jim digging holes. And we kind of learn a little bit more about that later, his dream and stuff like that. But he confronts Shane, and the main issue he has at the moment anyway is that Shane says he's going to make him stop, take the shovel away from him. And he's like, what, you're going to beat me up like you did Ed? And he's pretty much emphasizing that who put you in charge and who made you king and who all agreed with that.
That is their marriage. That is not his. He is not judge and jury. Who voted you king boss, huh?
So it seems from Jim coming back at Shane that Shane was the leader, but they hadn't really voted on it. They hadn't really said that he was. He was just a cop, like Rick. Like Rick comes into a situation and was the leader. Shane came into the situation. He kind of helped really formed the camp anyway. So he was the leader before Rick.
You know, the only reason I got away was because the dead were too busy eating my family.
And as we see also, Shane handcuffed Jim and tied him to a tree. So Jim was asking him, how long are you going to keep me here?
How long are you going to keep me like this?
So it really shows in every aspect that Shane is leading the Quarry Camp. So one more thing to throw out there. As the guys came back, Merle had stole the van, so they hiked it back to the camp. That took a long time. It's something you can almost blame Rick for, is that Rick just earlier hotwired the red car for Glenn to distract the walkers by. Why couldn't Rick hotwire another car or find a car with some keys in it? Something, somewhere along the way, if not in the city. That delay really cost some lives right there, and why couldn't they have found a car?
I remember my dream now. Why I dug the holes.
And the last bit about the Quarry Camp is the tension starting between Rick and Shane, not just between Lori and the family thing, because of Shane wanting to go to Fort Benning and Rick wanting to go to the CDC. And pretty much everybody is against it, actually. Even Lori, he talks to Shane about it, and Shane's against it. He says Fort Benning.
What about the CDC? Rick.
He asks Lori what she thinks off to the side, and she kind of says, we're all scared, and she kind of is hinting that they all want to try Fort Benning.
Look, the CDC thing. Lori, it's a mistake.
And this is the point where Rick and Shane go out in the woods to kind of talk and make a sweep of the area, and Shane points the shotgun at Rick, and that's where Dale catches him. But in all of that, Shane is saying, man, I saved your family and all this kind of stuff, and why won't you listen to me and reason? And Rick's doing the same thing. Why won't you listen to me and reason? So Shane eventually does change his mind, that he goes back to camp. And another thing that shows that Shane was pretty much the leader of the camp before Rick arrived, Shane walks up to the group and says, look, this is what I've decided. We're going to do what Rick says. Try for the CDC. All in favor, say aye. And that's when Morales, of course, said, I'm taking my family to Birmingham. We have family there. We're going to try to look for them. And Morales goes off at this point. So the rest of them hauls butt back kind of pretty much into the city to the CDC. Rick ended up getting the radio. He did the call to Morgan. They left a note on the car even for Morgan. And as I said, they headed to the CDC and not Fort Benning. So there's a lot of things, as I see anyway, as far as the show set up, Shane was handling things pretty good. If Rick hadn't have come along, if he had really died in the hospital or somehow got diverted or missed that chance of meeting the group, Glenn and them downtown or whatever, it seemed like Shane had things going pretty good. It seemed like when Rick was interjected in, things started going awry. But that's the big debatable thing, right? and the big debate between if Shane had lived, if Rick had done this or that, or become more like Shane earlier, because Rick definitely became like Shane later. But that's the first season, almost the whole Quarry Camp, and it's really a lot of good stuff. If you rewatch season 1, haven't seen it in a long time, you'll be like, wow, you know, and it'll bring back so many memories and see little things maybe you missed the first time and connects to later down the line in other seasons. And there's several other topics I didn't even get to in this video. It was so long, such as this is the place that Judith was conceived, where Shane and Lori's relationship was blossoming, and his idea of family with Carl being his son, teaching him to hunt for frogs and tie knots and do all kinds of different things. He was living the life, man. And Rick returned. They found Rick in the city and brought him back, so that was the reuniting of Rick with his family, Lori and Carl. So there's a lot of stuff happened inside this Quarry Camp thing that I didn't even touch on. It's such a great scene and a lot of episodes that it played out through in the first season. Just epic. But man, this video's went way longer than I had planned it to. So let's continue the discussion in the comments below and I will join you there. This is James in Nashville. As always, guys, thanks for watching and stay tuned for more dead stuff.